Day 50. We are now halfway through this hardcore adventure, and I've been able to progress quite far from my humble beginnings as a lost traveler in a hostile world. In just this time, I've gone from fending off spiders while struggling to stay alive in a tiny shack to handily eviscerating some of the deadliest mobs in the land in the world's cursed underbelly. I'm quite satisfied with what I've been able to accomplish thus far, but there are primordial forces in this world who stalk in the shadows and watch my every move. A lapse in judgment on their part had allowed me to quickly establish myself as a force to be reckoned with. Now that they realize how grave of a mistake they had made in letting me live, they're coming to put an end to my life. I've become too powerful though. They cannot stop me. Before they come to me, I will force them out of the dark and they will fight me on my own terms. This is Hardcore Rebirth Part 6, the beginning of the end. I hope you guys enjoy. I decided to dedicate today to exploration because I felt like I hadn't really done much of that yet. As I traversed, I stumbled upon the derelict ruins of a previously comfortable home. I wasn't able to find any inhabitants, but I wondered, were there perhaps others I had not yet located? The question stuck in my mind. In order to cross this river, I cut down the remains of a large jungle tree and used it to fashion some basic scaffolding. When you shift and right-click on a block with scaffolding, it places it on the opposite side wherever there's space. In this way, I was able to rapidly build a simple bridge. You remember those stupid fish that kept biting me at the start of the series? Yeah, well now they just die instantly thanks to my thorns. It's amazing. Thanks to both the rain and the realization that I didn't even know what I was looking for, I started heading back. I ran into some flying myrmexes en route to base. They looked pretty funky, but they didn't really seem to be that hostile, so I just left them alone. I heard rumors that circles of flowers mark valuable treasures underneath, so I decided to check it out. I didn't really know what to expect, but I found some peridot and slime blocks, which was interesting, but not particularly valuable. When night fell, I began to work on enchanting my gear, but of course, I forgot to bring some lapis. Thanks to my 1 in 7.5 trillion luck though, I was able to find some extra in this cave I had previously explored, so I pillared up and mined it. The extra levels would be nice to have as well. Then I started using this system I like to call roulette enchanting in order to maximize the efficiency of my levels. Basically, I put XP onto one piece of gear until I don't have enough to continue, then I move on to the next piece and repeat the process until I'm completely out. My horse underwent mitosis and split into two. I literally have no idea how this happened, but honestly, I kind of fear for my life now. I chose to make a nether portal at base because I felt that I was powerful enough at this point to fend off any stragglers that even dared to come through. The portal ended up linking back to my current one. While this wasn't really ideal, it was going to save me a lot of back and forth trips now. Also, check this out. I'm burning through netherrack faster than Saudi bombers burn through munitions on Yemeni civilians. I made a pickaxe out of my favorite material in the game because it mines even faster than gold, but has over 1000 durability. This is really one of the best things you can possibly get. Feeling a little bloodthirsty, I began to gather the materials to challenge my first boss in this series thus far, the Hirsch Geist. I had no idea how hard this fight would be, seeing as I'd never really done it before, but I felt very confident in my strength now. Perhaps a little, too confident. Who doesn't love the charming and engrossing lullabies of netherrack being ground up? Yeah, I slammed that block volume slider all the way to the left. Watching Hellfire dust being made is therapeutic, I swear, you really should try it out. Night was falling soon, so I equipped my trusty rings, lit the accursed altar, placed in my offerings, and hoped for the best. Almost immediately, the fight began. I was sharply taken aback by the speed and ferocity of this demonic forest spirit. Even with my constant sprinting forward, I was getting tossed around like a puny rag doll. Not only that, the wither curse that it placed on me was so deadly that it even outpaced regeneration 2. In shock from all of these sudden developments, I quickly ran into the forest to lure the Hirsch Geist into a more manageable fighting arena. I maneuvered it onto a trap and fired off a salvo of deadly rockets that finally destroyed the Hirsch Geist's ghastly form and left the forest at peace once more. My reward was an amazing looking skull which didn't even render properly thanks to my emoticon mod. That was pretty sad. With nothing better to do, it was right back to enchanting the Viridium gear I knew I needed if I wanted even a chance at survival in this terrifying new world. The Hirsch Geist fight had heavily shaken me, and I finally understood just how dangerous post-Beneath Hardcore Rebirth of the Night really was. As it turns out, Lunar Shield is actually stronger than Protection in the current patch, so I chose to use that instead. Just like that, with all of my gear finally enchanted, a new era had dawned. It was time for the new Nelston. Since my potion rings are thirstier than the Minecraft PvP community, I grinded some more levels to provide them with fuel. Of course, the second that I try to go back up to the surface, an overgrown tries to murk me. Thanks Rebirth, very cool. The sound that these guys make is yeah, you see what I mean? It was time to go back down to the Beneath and search for a rare blue ore that would be critical for progression. Sometimes blocks just don't place properly, you really gotta be careful. If a torch emits light in a circle shape, then it dropped as an item. If the light forms a diamond like that, then it landed properly. Did you know mining too many diamonds can cause inflation based on Article 3 Section 4 of the United Nations Economic Plan? Look up Inflation Rule 34. After all this prep, it was time to tackle a Beneath dungeon. I was looking for some of the rarest enchantments in the game, mythical books which would grant my weapons near instant attack cooldowns and unbelievable power. But this wasn't going to be easy. The Beneath dungeon is chock full of terrifyingly difficult mobs, hordes of the undead, and so much more. As soon as I was in, I gave the dungeon the good old British treatment and ransacked everything of value. The upper levels were pretty easy, but the deeper I go, the harder it would get. One of my favorite things to do in the Beneath is to collect these shields. They have no real utility, but they look so cool. Normally, I would be terrified of a situation like this, but the regeneration ring really emboldened me. The mushroom soup was so good that I ate the bowl too. Delicious. Cave spiders, like in vanilla, are awful. I hate them so much. Why do they even exist? The one thing that I am still absolutely terrified of is the webbing ability that spiders have. Combined with plague mobs, mace goblins, and swarms, my regen 2 ring would be more worthless than voting in Russia. Beneath dungeons are nice because you can theoretically survive off of scavenging alone. Torches, blocks, and food spawn in abundance, so you could just come here with an empty inventory, fight and loot your way through, and then go home with huge riches. The creepers just went ahead and breached the gates for me. Thanks guys. After finishing off the zombie guard, I noticed that this was the entrance to the deepest layer of the dungeon, the nether level. After blocking off the entrances, I took the Swiftness 2 book, an enchantment which would make my attack speed much higher. Once I finished eating some delicious stale fried chicken, I began my descent into the dangerous nether layer. The going was absolutely brutal. There was some unbelievably good loot, but because a zombie placed TNT down, the chests were blown sky high, and I had to quickly juggle items to find what I wanted while getting besieged by an endless stream of mobs. Right down the hall was what I called a treasure room of Beneath dungeons. This 4-wing area with 8 total chests chock full of mouth-watering loot. Of course, such a valuable location was heavily guarded by some of the most dangerous mobs in the game: wither skeletons, creepers, and goblins. This was a messy and brutal campaign. No matter how many mobs I slew, more just kept on coming, even after I located and destroyed all the spawners within the vicinity. Fortunately, thanks to my potion rings, no single mob here posed much of a threat to me. With my inventory completely filled with riches and ill-gotten loot, I made my way back up to the base while enjoying some savory mutton. After sorting out my items, I began to work on what I call the flex wall. My goal was to get a block of every single ore in the game and place it here as a monument to my achievements. By the end of the crafting spree, I had been able to obtain all the vanilla blocks, all the biomes of plenty gem blocks except amethyst, all the nether ores except onyx, and tin, copper, steel, and viridium. It's always so satisfying to see your machines work. One day they'll enslave us, but for now, I employ them for zero pay instead. I started off the day by making a water wheel and getting some mechanical components. The goal for today was to get Stoked Flame started so that I could start melting down useless equips and making late game materials. I made a few extra stashes because this stone generator was getting a little too productive. One day I'd set up a proper Radiant Trove, but for now this would suffice. Once the 12 hibachis were made, I started replacing the netherrack with the new and improved parts. The funny thing is that I keep forgetting to turn off sub notifications during recordings, so enjoy that jingle while I light the hibachis. Since I was going to power 12 hibachis, I needed to craft 2 bellows. I opted to feed in power from the bottom because that would be the most space efficient method. Of course, some renovations were needed to make sure that all of the guts of the operation fit. As I worked, a blood moon decided to rise that night. Now, that is terrifying. My walls were being more useless at keeping out spiders than the capital wall was at keeping out terrorists, so I started building an overhang. Hopper clocks are slightly more expensive, but they are toggleable and slow enough to properly work the bellows. After changing the orientation of the axles, I put the final pieces in place and the bellows started pumping. Stoked Flames have finally been achieved. The next thing I did after that was making a bronze block. This of course went immediately onto my flex wall. It was time to start melting down my unused equipment. My favorite childhood snack. Tasty. This crucible really did make me rich. I had been to the Beneath quite a few times by now, but I finally felt prepared enough to go get Mithril. Things started off pretty solidly and I was able to easily kill these mobs. The only really sketchy part about the descent was when I got shot down into a spider mosh pit, but that wasn't too hard to deal with. It was quite annoying though, and the hungry spiders did a number on my food supplies. After fighting my way through some more hordes, I finally reached the fable y=59, where Mithril begins to generate. Dwindling low on torches, I decided to do some final exploration before going back up to the surface. I'm glad I did because I found my first Mithril this way. I chose to clear out the mobs in the vicinity first because they would be huge hazards to my extraction process. As I did this, the message for the invasion popped up in chat and I was thrilled. In essence, I had just been granted a free ticket back up to the surface. Once all the mobs were dead, I shattered the final barrier and the magic blue metal was mine. Feeling cocky because of the invasion, I took a huge risk and started running through the Beneath floor. This was an awful idea because my worst nightmare came true. In the blink of an eye, I was frozen in place by a torrent of spiders webbing me, a mace goblin came by and started shredding my already damaged armor, and to top it all off, a plague zombie joined in the fun and made sure I could not regenerate. By some miracle, I was able to get out of the web, and I just ran. I dug into the side of the cave as I was getting shot by skeletons and quickly blocked off the entrance. As I was waiting for the teleport, mobs started trying to break in, so I had to act fast and made a second barricade. I was even making a third, but the teleport finally came. My recording failed for the invasion because it ended up corrupting, and yeah, I kind of just lost all the footage. However, I do have this one clip which I was able to grab because it was just too funny to miss. There are legends that speak of a heavenly realm which holds great power. It was time to visit the Aether. Steeling myself for the worst, I waited to warp into the skies above. Of course, my spawn was god-awful. I can't remember the last time that I ever got a decent portal location in any of my playthroughs. After grabbing some blocks, it was time to bridge to the islands. While I didn't want to speed bridge, the speed 2 on my armor made me go about as fast as my regular ninja bridging anyways. I was quite concerned about these demon birds, but they're friends, so I put away my sword. Quicksoil has a really unique movement mechanic where you actually gain momentum while walking on it. In other words, it is ridiculously good for certain mechanical builds. While roaming the lands, I stumbled across a slider dungeon. These guys are quite powerful, but also guard some uniquely powerful treasures, so I went in. Sliders can only be damaged with pickaxes, so the best thing to do against it is to dual wield picks. However, I didn't really care since I was already unbelievably strong, so I just equipped my favorite pickaxe and went to town. After a long fight, the gravity controlling slider was finally dead. It left me some heart crystal shards and a key to the treasure chest below him. The loot wasn't all that great, but I was glad to get my hands on some Aether exclusive stuff. Besides, this lightning dagger was so good that it even froze my game. Have you ever thought about why there's only a stairway to heaven, but a highway to hell? It was time to desecrate the temple of the Aether Valkyries. I felt kinda bad for invading the territory of a group wholly unassociated with my strife, but I would need their power to weather the oncoming storm, and these angel warriors knew only the language of violence. One by one, the defenders of the site fell until I had collected 10 medallions from their corpses. Deep into the core of the building, I finally found the Queen of Valkyries herself, Hirsch Geist. Medals in hand to prove my might, I accepted her challenge to fight, and the duel began. I tried to needle her with powerful poisonous darts, but projectiles bounced off of her holy shield. Unable to use her own arsenal against her, I unsheathed my sword and began a brutal contest to the death. At last, I was victorious, and the queen was no more, leaving behind only her trusty gold sword, some fragments of her life essence, and a silver key. In the chest was exactly what I was searching for, the fabled lightning sword. Even better, it had an amazing modifier on it. I was very pleased with this expedition. After looting the chest, I tore down the glowstone lamps and collected some of the temple brick. This material was so heat resistant that it could be used as an alternative to refractory bricks in a kiln setup. When all was said and done, I parachuted off the raised temple with an inventory full of loot. By sheer dream luck, I found yet another slider dungeon, so of course I had to go in. Before fighting the boss, I mined up some of this precious ambrosium, which was a great call because this ended up revealing Zanite gemstones, and right by that was a pocket of gravitite. All 3 Aether ores had been obtained, just like that. This fight was nothing too crazy. Just like before, the poor guy stood no chance. Of course, the chest loot was pretty subpar as well. Since I couldn't find my portal, I decided to skydive off the edge with a parachute. I was hungry and lost, but at least the Aurora Borealis was nice, just like it had been on day number 1. By dawn though, I was finally back in the familiar apple orchard which surrounded the hill upon which my base rested. The next day began with me adding 2 new blocks to the flex wall, Zanite and Ambrosium. Next up, it was time to make the best music disc in Minecraft. I was a bit stupid here with using the heart container. Post-recording Nelson recommends making a broken heart instead because it's so much more useful. Apparently you can't cheese cheese, so I just drank the milk and swallowed my pride with it. My game audio didn't capture properly, so unfortunately you can't hear the audio. Here is a clip of the song though. Just added 2 new materials to the wall, the Electrum and Gravitite blocks. Now my Aether collection was complete. It was about time that I invested in a good grappling hook. So I made an upgrade table, crafted the basic hook, and started working on upgrades. I love how customizable this thing is. It's actually so useful. To apply the upgrades once you set them, right click with the grappling hook and you're done. I gave this bad boy a test fire and sure enough, it worked like a charm. I left to go deal with some urgent stuff halfway through the recording and this ended up happening. Honestly, I completely deserved this loss and I'm just grateful that these totems of undying saved me. I was having way too much fun with this thing. Seriously, it's so cool. While exploring the boreal forest, I came across a slumbering frostmaw. A dreadful beast that would terrorize the woods for as long as he was alive. I knew I needed to vanquish him if I wanted continued access to these precious spruce logs. Feeling brave, I challenged him head on, but that was an absolute disaster as his powerful swipes shredded my HP. I ran back to shoot him, but decided that the proper thing to do was to fight him head on. So I went back to finish the fight with my katana, and then it was all over. He disappeared in a flash of smoke, leaving behind only some broken fangs and his volatile ice crystal. To continue my progress, I would need a ton more wood for machines. With the frost mod gone, it was time to get deforesting. I think Bolsonaro would be quite proud, no? If you're wondering why the time suddenly cut from 7 AM to almost 7 PM, it's because I spent the last 12 in-game hours looking for limestone for refractory material with zero luck. Dolomite isn't as good, but it is a decent substitute for now. Time to pound this rock harder than Kilo's dad. I mean, what? Never put hellfire dust in a stoked cauldron. Just don't do it. I found a rat which I tried to tame with my spare cheese. Unfortunately, he kinda just climbed up and left? Man, I don't even know. This was more boring than watching paint dry, but it was essential if I wanted to progress, so here we go. By the morning, I had crafted all the essential components of my refractory. All I had to do now was set it up. The sun was out, and so were the mobs. Seriously, where did these guys even come from? No matter, it was time to make my refractory kiln. I will make a full tutorial on this later, but for now, let me know if you're interested. Once the barrel was down, I got the mithril and started burning it to extract the flowing spirits. These soaking pots next to me would be critical soon. With this fluid extractor, I plan to pull out the flowing spirits, put them into the soaking pots, and then turn the lunar water into bottled spirits. While this process was ongoing, I carved out a small dark area to place my ancestral infuser in. Make sure you don't let any other blocks touch either the soul sand or the infuser itself. I placed a redstone lamp down here so while the infuser wasn't in use, I could avoid mob spawns and then turn things dark for when I needed to perform some rituals. Each bottle of spirits gives you 8 total spirits to craft with, so just divide the number of spirits a recipe calls for by 8, then round up to get the number of bottled spirits that you need. This ring of free action was what I wanted eventually since it makes you immune to slowness and cobwebs, but since it needed post-end materials, that probably wasn't going to happen for a long time. And we're up to 24 spirits now, just a few more to go to craft some basic baubles. Beneath time again, I need more mithril for my baubles. Plague zombie riding a web spider? May as well just run/kill on me at this point. There were a lot of valuable resources in this small cave area, heart crystal shards and mithril chief among them. This cave was seriously loaded. By the time I was done, this was the entire hull. Not bad, huh? And that was it. It's time for day 51.